Hello, everyone. It's Denise from Dobby Books. Today, I'm going to review what I've finished for the week and what I'm still working on. So let's get started with that. Now, I thought I was done with these two books last week. I actually wasn't. I looked through them and I realized I had more to go. So the first one I'm going to cover is the book by Raymond A. Moody Jr., MD, Life After Life, which he wrote some 40 years ago originally. And just a brief summary. He talks about this is when he first started collecting information about people who were having near death experiences, NDEs. And in that, he covers similarities that the people went through. And these are people from all walks of life. Not all of them had the Judeo Christian upbringing. There were those who were either agnostic or atheist. And he was remarking how there were similarities there. He also talks about, I want to talk about whether there was the dark tunnel, there was a boundary that if they crossed, they wouldn't come back. Another one of those similarities was the life review. Also, there was some sort of guide, some sort of person always to their right that they may or may not have seen, but was always accompanying them. Sometimes this person would speak with them, and it would never be like I'm talking to you now, but just a transmission of that information. It was an instantaneous transfer of information. Those types of similarities would show up in these stories, as well as he covers in chapter 3 parallels of these NDE stories with other spiritual traditions. So, for example, in the Bible, he covers a couple of parts in the Old Testament, like the book of Daniel and also the book of Isaiah. I'm trying to get to that chapter, which briefly talk about what happens to the dead. And then he goes into the New Testament and Acts chapter 26, where Paul is explaining something to a king. Yeah, and he talks about when Paul was knocked down from his horse. Now, before Paul had become this great Christian evangelist, he was a Pharisee, he was a Jew, and he was absolutely committed to his Jewish faith and traditions. And when this new sect, which at that time, if I'm not mistaken, Christianity as a religion, as a denomination, had not quite broken off yet. It was still considered an offshoot of Judaism. And Paul was persecuting that particular sect. And he was imprisoning people, and he was going from town to town on his horse, and he had companions with him. And there is a scene that's described in Acts chapter 26 where Paul, on his way to the next town to continue to arrest these Christians, is knocked from his horse by a bright light. He hears a voice in heaven who tells him, "Why are you persecuting me?" And this voice tells him to go into town and where to stay. Paul is blinded for 3 days. So this is one experience that Paul has with a very bright light, which is one of the things that Dr. Moody brings up these people with NDEs experienced, although the difference with the NDE is that this light did not blind them. Like Paul said, it blinded him. Also, Paul goes into, let me see. No, that's not that one. Okay, and then the next one he talks about is Plato. Now, we all know Plato was a Greek philosopher long before the Apostle Paul. And Dr. Moody states here, Plato believed strongly in the use of reason, logic, and argument in the attainment of truth and wisdom, but only up to a point. For in addition, he was a great visionary who suggested that ultimately truth can only come to one in an almost mystical experience of enlightenment and insight. And in some of his, I want to say speeches, he brings these up, like in Phaedo, and the Republic, as well as Gorgias. He touches on this particular topic. And he discusses various passages how the soul, which has been separated from its body, may meet and converse with the departed spirits of others and be guided through the transition from physical life to the next realm by guardian spirits. So again, this is a parallel that Dr. Moody noticed, which added to his, I guess it added to his research, and he just found that intriguing, which of course I would as well. He mentions that in Book 10 of the Republic, he said, perhaps the most striking similarity of all occurs. There, Plato recounts the myth of a Greek soldier. Now, was a Greek soldier who fought in, gosh, there was a particular combat and many soldiers were killed, and was also wounded. And I'm going to assume he was deeply wounded and almost dead. Maybe his breathing didn't seem very evident at the time. And the bodies of these soldiers were being placed on a funeral pyre to be burned. And it's during just, whether it was just lit or what have you, that comes back to consciousness. And he talks about an experience he had, an out-of-body experience that he had. And this can be read in Book 10 of the Republic, another parallel. And then Dr. Moody goes into another parallel that can be found in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. So if you get to with Plato, you can get the 6 dialogues and you can read the Republic and read that particular story. And there's also the Tibetan Book of the Dead. This is the Penguin Classics Deluxe Edition. And it's in this book that Dr. Moody says that the book itself was read as part of the funeral ceremony because it talks about how to prepare for death. And it was to the dying person it was read to the dying person during the closing moments of his life. And it was thought to serve 2 functions. First, to help the dying person to keep in mind the nature of each new wondrous phenomena as he experienced it. And second, it was to help those still living to think positive thoughts and not to hold the dying one back by their grief. He also says that the correspondence between the early stages of death described in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which it relates, and those which have been recounted to me, this is Dr. Moody talking, by those who have come near to death, is nothing short of fantastic. So these really stood out for him. And then the final parallel he brings up is by a person named Emanuel Swedenborg, a Swede who was born in the late 17th century. And initially, he wrote a lot of things that would contribute to natural science, such as he first oriented towards anatomy, physiology, and psychology, and he gained quite a bit of recognition. But later in his life, Dr. Moody says, however, that he underwent a religious crisis and began to tell of experiences in which he had purportedly been in communication with spiritual entities from beyond. His later works abound with vivid descriptions of what life after death is like. Again, the correlation between what he writes of some of his spiritual experiences and what those who have come back from close calls with death report is amazing. And throughout these parallels, he provides you with the examples and case histories, etc., so you can read through them. So, whether or not you believe in NDEs or not is not really the issue, but I did find this a very good initial study on NDEs. This was put together in the 70s, so it really was a new topic. In the end of the book, Dr. Moody describes when he had to give his first talk about this topic. And he said what encouraged him and surprised him is that as he was speaking to this room full of physicians and sharing his experience as a physician and what his patients experienced and shared with him, he said a lot of the physicians in the room, their faces, their expressions changed, and all of a sudden they'd be nodding their heads because he saw that in those expressions, some of those physicians had experienced the same thing from their patients as well. So I thought it was a good read. I enjoyed it. Now, the next one that I did finish was Edgar Cayce on the Akashic Records. So, the Akashic Records, for those that are not familiar with that, is what Christians would describe as the book of life, where everything that we've done in life is recorded. Our names are there, etc. And it's something that you read about in the book of Revelation. And the Akashic Records are known in other spiritual traditions as well. And in Edgar Cayce's case, when he would go into his trance, he was known as the sleeping prophet. And in some readings, he was the request was to go to the Akashic Records so that he could provide information on these individuals who had made the particular request. He talks about how with the Akashic Records, it does talk about a person's past. And of course, with Edgar Cayce, by the way, he grew up a Christian and taught Sunday school all his life, even after he started having his experiences. He had to encounter what he learned through his own readings, the concept or the belief in reincarnation. You don't have to believe in reincarnation in order to read this book, but it's good to, read it as an informational thing. And he said the Akashic Records record our past lives. They also say something about our present lives and our future. And as far as the past lives go, he was talking about this life that we're living now and any past lives we may have had. And the purpose in life is to grow. To learn and to grow, basically. To learn intellectually, but also to grow spiritually, because our objective should be to grow closer to God. And as we are transformed by setting those standards for ourselves, our growth brings us in that direction. And Edgar Cayce mentions that those who have not overcome certain difficulties, certain character flaws in past lives, will be addressing those same issues in their future lives. Some people never really make it. And he emphasizes that when we talk about success, that in the readings, it was advised not to focus on exterior successes, but interior successes. Our focus should be not on us so much and what we can get, but on others and how we can be of service to others. Because in doing that, we grow. And those other areas of our life that we may have issues with, we find we're better able to conquer them, to overcome them, or at the very least, to lessen them. So it was just very interesting. He said that also stating with the Akashic Records that there are, for example, when we're born, there is a purpose in our life. Some of us are meant to be very well known, to accomplish huge things, and some of us are not. But they're all equally important. But what they emphasize during the readings is that our present life is not set in stone. So if we have this certain trajectory that we're told, if this child goes in this direction in life, then this is what will happen. This is what they will accomplish. That can always change. There are always forks in the road where that person has a decision to make. And in summary, it says that person cannot turn around at some point in their life and say, I didn't get this because this person, and I didn't do this because of that person or this circumstance. Because what they emphasize is that free will is the key. That decides it really. And it's not what happens to a person or so much what circumstances they're in the here and now, but what they decide to do in the current situation that they're in. How are they going to handle that? How are they going to approach that? They also talk about how the mind is a very important function, a very important builder in a person's life. How we think is what we bring to our lives. And I don't think I'm going to get in I don't think like in the manifestation sort of sense, although it may be that. But I think in the simplest sense, is if you tend to be an optimist, then you're going to find your life is going to go pretty much in that direction, in spite of difficulties and challenges. You will not be defeated as much by them as someone who's negative and who complains and who likes to blame other people for their own problems. The optimist and the person who says, well, it's up to me, I can do this, and even someone, who is in a difficult situation, for example, and says, God, help me with this, I want to grow through this, I want to move forward through this, I don't want to stay stuck here, help me get out of this, help me move forward with this. That's the free will saying, I'm going to make the best of this situation, I'm going to make the right decision. And that's what's emphasized throughout here. The Akashic records are something that are constantly existing past, present, and future, and that the individual is ultimately the one that makes their life what it is and what it will become. This was a very interesting read. It really was. I thought it was very informative. So that was that read. Now, the one that I'm still reading is Never Forget Your First, The Life of George Washington. This is a good intro, people. This really is. I am a little more than halfway through, and I love how it covers, it talks about George Washington's mother, and not necessarily in the terribly negative light that you read about it in other biographies. It also covers more of Martha Washington and their home life, as well as what Washington did as a general in the army, as a I guess I would say plantation owner, as a husband, as a stepfather, and then as an uncle. He and Martha never had children of their own. Martha's children were from her previous marriage. And then once those kids were grown, the son of Martha had passed away. Um, and so they were raising the two of the four children of Jack, who was his stepson. So they always had the children in their lives. George Washington apparently just loved having the children in his life. He really enjoyed that part. And I often wondered to myself if he didn't kind of think, oh, I wish I could have had kids. But you know what? I'm grateful that I have these kids. So this is a good read, and I'm almost done. And when I'm done, I'll give you a full review on it. The next one that I'm reading is Augustus. I like the way Anthony Everett writes. He has kept my interest. It's never dragged, it's just continued on, always very interesting. And I am a third of the way through. So, again, Augustus by Anthony Everett, and it's covering the life of the first emperor of Rome, Octavian. And I guess I'm at the point now where he has married for the second time. He married an older woman the first time. They had 2 children, and now he has married for the second time someone closer to his own age, and it's just he and Mark Antony right now. So I really am enjoying the flow of this book. So now I have my 4 books, my 2 books that I'm currently reading now, hardcover. And what am I listening to? I'm listening to book 7 of the Harry Potter series, and I always seem to listen to the series again during the semester, never during the summer months. And I think it just kind of helps me to have something non-serious to listen to. I like that little escape. But this year I'm listening to the audio series narrated by Stephen Fry, and that was the series I could never get before. I don't remember who the narrator is of the ones in the United States. I know his name it's escaping me. I'll put it up here for you. And Stephen Fry was the narrator for the ones in the UK. And I guess sometime in 2024, we received the notice from Audible that we could now get the series as narrated by Stephen Fry. So now I have both audio series. I don't mind. And Stephen Fry does a fantastic job, absolutely fantastic job of Stephen Fry. My gosh, what a talented man! He writes, he acts, he gives talks. What a tremendously talented human being. He does a fantastic job with the narration. What am I reading on Kindle? I stopped reading the one on the houses of history because I got the about a paperback because I'm going to be using it for the semester. And the one I'm still reading is Capital in the 21st Century. I have not touched it for the last week, so I can't give you an update. And the last one that I was also reading was The Closing of the American Mind by Alan Bloom. That I have not touched in the week either. And I believe that is it. The only one I think I'm going to end up getting done last is the Trivium, the Liberal Arts of Logic, Grammar, and Rhetoric, is because it's just so rigorous. I have not touched it either in the week. So we'll see how that goes. But that's it. That is my week. And the next time that we get together, I'm going to go over some book hauls I may have done during the week. So, everybody, enjoy your weekend. Take care. I love you all. Bye bye.